Hi, everybody. This is Maya, and today is day 4 of Novel Prep Month. First, for the disclaimer, if you have missed the first couple videos, I'm going to include the day 1 video down in the down bar. Also, I am writing blog posts that go with each video, and if you want to get the full experience, please visit www.mayagood.com. That link as well is in the down bar. Now, for the rest of the businessy type stuff at the beginning of videos, first, I'm not a professional writer. I'm not a teacher of writing. That's not what I do. What I am is a person who's been working really hard to learn to write for years. And I failed National Novel Writing Month multiple times before finding really the recipe to being able to successfully complete National Novel Writing Month. This series of videos is really meant for anyone that wants to participate. So whether you are writing your first novel and you have plans of editing it and getting it published, or whether you just decided to do this personal challenge and you want to give yourself the best chance of finishing as possible, these videos really will help you. So let's get started. For day 4, we're going to narrow down the list of ideas that you develop through your dynamic brainstorming. So, at the very least, you should have a list of about 20 ideas. But most likely, what you found was every idea led to more ideas. So, you may actually have a list of 50 ideas or even more. And the more ideas you have going into this part of the process, the better. Because what we're going to do is we're going to find the most dynamic, the most interesting, the most emotional idea that you can use for your national novel writing novel. Just because an idea is interesting doesn't mean it's going to have the emotional pull to really feed you through 30 days of a pretty insane writing goal. 1,667 words a day may not be a lot for a professional writer, but for someone who's just starting to learn to write, that level of writing can feel insurmountable. But if you pick a core idea for your novel that has a lot of emotion, that has a lot of action, that makes you want to write, you're going to find the month goes by much easier. And this was especially important for me because I tend to write fairly dark literary fiction. And literary fiction has the reputation of being boring. So finding ideas that would really pull me through was even more important because I didn't want to write myself into a boring literary fiction hole. And this process is what I use to narrow down my ideas. Now, this particular process may need to be altered a little bit if you have been researching world building and you've been planning this for a really long time. I would not suggest going into National Novel Writing Month with only 4 weeks to go with an idea that's going to take a lot of research. Yes, people can get around it by typing things like insert research here as they're writing their novel, but every time you do that, it actually does slow you down. And if you feel like you're going to have that internal hiccup as you're writing, or if you're the type of person that is not going to be able to write, need to research the type address here as you're writing without it slowing you down, without you feeling the urge to go onto Google and find out what that historical dress would really look like, then I would suggest picking a topic that's not going to take a ton of research. Now, this is slightly different for science fiction and things like that because you can just make that up. But even so, if you haven't had the time to do a lot of world building, you're probably going to have a lot of inconsistencies and stuff that you're going to need to fix in editing later. And as long as you know that going into the process, then it's all good. But just be aware of that. If you're doing a novel that takes a lot of research, it is preferable to start researching your novel several months ahead of time, not in October. So, with that said, let's get started. Here's what I want you to do. You're going to first look at your giant list of words because what you have done is you have had these ideas in your head, on recorders, on little slips of paper, all over the place. And what I want you to do is I want you to write them down, preferably on paper. I know, paper. Imagine that. You're going to have a list of ideas on paper. And it's important that it's on paper because our handwriting holds a lot of emotion. So when we're bored, our handwriting tends to look a certain way. And when we get excited, our handwriting often will get scrunched, or it will slant, or it will look messier because you're excited as you're writing it. And those are all clues to how you're feeling about a particular idea. The first thing I want you to do is you're going to read each idea slowly, and you're going to ask yourself, do I feel bored? That's the first thing. And any idea that you read that you don't have an emotional response to, any idea that you read and your tone is the same tone you would use to say, we need to buy potatoes, you're going to cross that off the list. You may use that idea later. You may use it when you figured out ways to add more conflict. But right now, we've only got 3 weeks to National Novel Writing Month. So you're going to cross out any list that does not give you a strong emotional response. Once you're done with that, you're going to go back through the list, the remaining items on the list. And here's what you're going to do. You're going to look for anything that has a gut feeling of nausea or involuntary disgust, anything that makes your skin crawl. So if you say an idea and you just feel kind of gross about it, I don't suggest you use that idea for National Novel Writing Month. Now, that idea may make a great idea later on, but if you're having an instantaneous gut negative reaction to an idea, you're probably going to have some emotional blocks and stuff you're going to need to work through in order to write that idea. And November is not the time to go through a whole lot of emotional growth. November is the time to find an idea that can sail you through the month. So anything that makes you feel gross, anything that makes you just feel like, I don't want to write that, ew, cross that off the list. Then you should have a few ideas left. You're probably, if you started out with 60 ideas, you're probably going to have like 30 left now, because a lot of those ideas were probably pretty boring and you didn't see anything interesting about them. And some of those ideas were like, I really don't want to write that. And so you may have your list narrowed down by half by now. You may have more ideas than that. So now you're going to look for ideas that give you a really strong emotion that is close to joy. Now, it doesn't have to be a happy emotion though. So things that I've found that help me get through National Novel Writing Month is scenes where I'm crying because I'm so into what my character is feeling and I feel so horrible about what's happening to my character. Those scenes fly off my fingers. Scenes where I'm laughing, scenes where I'm smiling, those are scenes where writing feels seamless. They're also the types of books that readers feel the most involved in. So what I want you to do is go back through the list and read each item. And as you're reading each item, you're going to just really pay attention to your body. I suggest you just read the first item. You're going to close your eyes, read the first item, and ask yourself, how do I feel? Do I smile when I hear this idea? Do I laugh when I hear this idea? Do I feel sad when I hear this idea? Do I have an emotion? Maybe you can't name the emotion. Maybe you just feel sweaty when you read that idea, or maybe you feel tingly when you read that idea. Those are the ideas you're going to keep on the list because those ideas have strong emotions attached to them. And strong emotions make the month go by much, much faster. So after you have crossed out the ideas that are boring, and you've crossed out the ideas that take a ton of research, and you've crossed out the ideas that you really don't want to write about, you're going to be left with the ideas that are interesting, that are fun, that have a ton of emotion. But just because something has a ton of emotion doesn't mean it's going to make a whole story. So now I want you to go through each of your ideas and ask yourself, does this idea have inherent conflict? So a lot of times, like me, because I have written like a handful of short stories and 2 novels, and I have probably a half a dozen partials, I think in one sentence summaries now, which I didn't used to do. And so I think in the idea of this is my main character, this is what they want, and this is what's standing in their way, usually. And so a lot of times my ideas are formatted that way. But if you're just a random person who's never done this before, you may not naturally have ideas like that. You may have an idea that, say, serial killer, maybe the idea. But really, what does that tell you? Like, if you get tingly writing about a serial killer, that doesn't tell you anything about the serial killer, what the serial killer wants, who the main character is, what the conflict is. So now what I want you to do is I want you to look at these ideas and ask yourself, when you think of these ideas, what do you picture? Do you picture a main character that's fighting against something? Do you picture another world? Do you picture sadness because somebody's trying to get to some goal, or maybe they're meant to be with somebody and they can't? If you instantly feel like this is a story that you can create conflict around, then you're going to keep that idea. If the idea is literally something as simple as serial killer, you're going to cross that off the list. So what you're going to find is, in the beginning, your ideas may literally just be like a genre. But as you've gotten through the ideas, you're going to see serial killer who's in love with a cop. Whoa, that's a conflict. So that's what you're looking for. Any ideas where you have a conflict inherent in the idea, it's going to be easier for you starting out. Because if you have just a more global, just vague idea, then you're going to have to do more work to figure out what the conflict is going to be. And we only have 3 weeks. So let's hop, skip, and a jump right over some of that work if we can, right? That's how I'm thinking of it. So once you've gotten it down to just a couple ideas that you've instantly already thought of that instantly have conflict, then you're going to just look at them and ask yourself, which one of these ideas do I want to spend the next month with? And there's your idea. And I've looked at other ways of figuring out my next project. I really have. But what I found is, if I pay attention to my subconscious, if I pay attention to my body's reactions, I'll know which one I need to write. Just like with the whole idea of conflict. Yes, I can spend 3 hours talking to you about conflict. And eventually we may need to spend some time, like 15 minutes on conflict. But our subconscious already knows how to tell stories. And if the story is developed enough in your subconscious, you will already have some conflict in the idea already, without even realizing it, without studying it. It'll already be there. And so by picking the ones that are already further along, that already have the most emotions, what you're really doing is you're picking the ones that your subconscious is already attached to the most. And so that was our day 4 video. Tomorrow, we're actually going to talk about how we're going to outline this in a way that is a little more holistic, a little bit more fun, and actually a ton easier than what you may have looked at before. I'll see you tomorrow. Ciao.